So we'll start. Last time we did till genetic code and we started with the first step of protein synthesis. So in protein synthesis process, there are 5 steps. First is activation of amino acids, also called as amino acylation or charging of transfer RNA. Second is initiation, elongation, termination, and last is folding and post-translational processing, that is modification. So we'll start with the first step, that is activation of amino acids or amino acylation or charging. For this, the right side this table shows the essential components. So all these are the requirements for activation of amino acids. So the process requires 20 amino acids, 20 amino acyl transfer RNA synthetases, these are the enzymes which will perform the reaction, 32 or more transfer RNAs, ATP is the energy required, and Mg2 plus is a cofactor for enzyme. That is amino acid transfer RNA synthetase requires Mg plus 2 as a cofactor. Okay. Now you're familiar with the transfer RNA structure because this transfer RNA will get amino acylated. So here you just have to remember that this is the 3' end of this amino acyl arm which will get amino acylated. That means this, remember the sequence CCA, this CCA sequence is common to all transfer RNAs and this sequence has been added post-transcriptionally. This sequence is required because this is the end where amino acid will be added in the process. Okay. Then the actual process of amino acylation. We have last time just did this diagram. So in this diagram, let's start from here. This is the enzyme. Amino acyl transfer RNA synthetase enzyme, and all these are the binding sites of the enzyme. So first, amino acid binds. So here they have taken valine, and then ATP binds, and the first reaction takes place where this amino acid gets attached to this ATP, but in the reaction what happens? 2 phosphates gets released in the form of pyrophosphate and it forms amino acyl AMP. It's the first reaction. So what is the product? Amino acyl AMP. Then transfer RNA binds to its respective binding site and then second reaction takes place. In second reaction what happens? This enzyme transfers this amino acid to the transfer RNA and this charged or amino acylated transfer RNA is released and AMP is also released from the enzyme, and then enzyme again resumes its original shape. Here you can see there is a change in shape when this particular reaction takes place. So in this diagram you have to focus on these 2 steps because these are the 2 steps where the reaction happens. Rest of the steps are either binding or the release of the product. So what is the ultimate reaction? Amino acid plus transfer RNA plus ATP, the enzyme which requires Mg plus 2 gives amino acyl transfer RNA plus AMP plus pyrophosphate, right? Transfer RNA gets attached by this amino acid and in the process this ATP gets converted into AMP and pyrophosphate. Now here I said that these 2 processes are important. These 2 steps of the reaction is important, and what happens chemically we'll see in the detail. Okay, before going into chemical details, here the enzyme, this amino acid is valine, right? So the transfer RNA which will get attached will have its anticodon. So what is this? What is the anticodon here? Can you tell me the anticodon for valine in this diagram? Students, what is the anticodon here for valine? You understood codon anticodon concept, right?
Ma'am, CAA.
GTT. Okay, so now they're saying GTT. Okay, next second. It is AAC. Okay, why AAC and not CAA? It's better if you speak rather than writing in the chat box. It is quick. It is because by convention, you read nucleic acid sequence from 5' to 3' end. So transfer RNA, this short arm, I told you that you have to remember the short arm is 5' end and this long is the 3' end of the transfer RNA. So you read the anticodon from the 5' to 3' end. So anticodon is AAC. So what will be the codon on messenger RNA? Now anticodon is AAC. So
TTG.
is thymine present in the RNA?
UUG.
Now it is right, but still here we are reading it from 5' to 3'. So the mRNA would be in an anti-parallel direction,
3'
right?
to 5'.
So it would be GUU. Imagine the mRNA would be anti-parallel. Complementary base pairing takes place, right? So both the sequences are in anti-parallel direction. So here we are reading from 5' to 3'. We are reading mRNA also in 5' to 3'. So if you check here, see, valine, GUU is the codon for valine. So here in that example, they have taken this particular codon. So they have used this AAC as anticodon. Getting it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, here, this diagram is showing the what happens during the reaction. So this is the amino acid. Remember only two steps. We are here focusing only on two steps. So this is amino acid and this is the ATP molecule. The first reaction takes place between ATP and amino acid. So what happens? This carboxyl group attacks on this phosphate and it breaks this bond between this alpha phosphate and this beta phosphate, and this pyrophosphate is released and this amino acid gets attached to this phosphate. So like this. So anhydride bond forms here, and what is the product? Product is amino acyl AMP. So first the amino acid gets attached to AMP. Okay. This is the first step. Then in the next step, there are two mechanisms based on the class of enzyme. Amino acyl transfer RNA synthetase enzymes are of two types, class 1 and class 2. So this is the mechanism for class 1 and this is the mechanism for class 2. So class 1 amino acyl transfer RNA synthetase enzyme, what happens? this amino acyl AMP, and this is the transfer RNA with the CCA end. That's why here you can see that adenine nucleotide. Okay, this is the 3' end of the transfer RNA. So here the reaction will take place between the adenine and the amino acyl AMP. So in class 1 mechanism, this 2' OH acts as a nucleophile and attacks on this carboxyl group of amino acid. And this bond breaks and then it forms a bond with this OH. So you can imagine this gets reversed and it attaches from its carboxyl end to the 3' end of the transfer RNA. Okay, and this AMP gets released in the process. So now you get a charged transfer RNA because now the amino acid is attached to the transfer RNA, but it has attached to the 2' end. Transesterification reaction takes place. It is an additional step in this mechanism where this 3' OH attacks on this carbon and the amino acid gets shifted from 2' to 3'. So here is the amino acyl transfer RNA because the amino acid has to get attached to the 3' end of the transfer RNA and not on the 2'. Okay. So now it has been correctly attached to the 3' end. In class 2 amino acyl transfer RNA synthesis mechanism, directly this 3' OH attacks on this carbonyl carbon CO and direct bond is formed between this 3' OH and the amino acid. Okay, so comparatively this class 2 mechanism is direct and this is indirect. First amino acid get attached to 2' and then shifted to 3'. Now the obvious question is why it happens. Like if the amino acid has to get attached to 3', why it gets attached first to 2'? So the reason could be in the structure of the enzyme. These two enzymes, they have different structure. This class 2 synthetase is a dimer and class 1 synthetase is a monomer. So basically when this transfer RNA attaches to its binding site on the enzyme, it must have positioned itself like so that this 2' OH acts as a nucleophile. And then when it attaches to its 2', then 3' acts as a nucleophile and gets amino acid gets shifted to the 3'. While in class 2, the transfer RNA is able to position itself so that it can directly accept amino acid to its 3'. Okay. So difference in the mechanism is because of the difference in the structure of the enzyme. And these enzymes are transfer RNA synthetase. Remember there are two types of enzymes, synthase and synthetase. Wherever you see the synthetase, this T usually refers to ATP. The synthetase enzymes requires energy and generally synthase enzymes doesn't require any ATP. Okay. So here remember the synthetase means they require ATP for the reaction. So now at the end of the reaction, either it could be class 1 or class 2. Ultimate product is amino acyl transfer RNA, also called as charge transfer RNA. Okay. Now, so this is the structure of the general structure of amino acyl transfer RNAs. You have this transfer RNA. This is the amino acid arm with this 3' end. So here they have shown only the last adenine nucleotide of the CCA sequence, and this is the amino acid. Now here is the general structure. So particular amino acid will get attached only to the particular transfer RNA because transfer RNA is also specific because that transfer RNA should carry the anticodon for that amino acid. So transfer RNA is also specific. Here this table shows two classes of amino acid transfer RNA synthetase. So there are 20 amino acids. So 10 amino acids are amino acylated by class 1 enzyme and Rest of the 10 gets amino acylated by class 2 enzymes. And here, if you notice that, you remember the classes of amino acids, there are acidic amino acids, there are basic amino acids, polar, neutral, and non-polar neutral. So in each class, they have differentiated or segregated the group accordingly. That if there are two acidic amino acids, one acidic amino acid get amino acylated by one enzyme, that is class 1, and other by class 2. So here you can see this is glutamic acid. GLU gets charged by class 1, while ASP, this is aspartic acid, another acidic amino acid, gets amino acylated by class 2. So roughly from each group, equal amino acids gets amino acylated by these two classes of enzymes. Okay. Now, these amino acid transferase synthetase enzymes have proofreading ability, and this is very important. Why? Because see, there are 20 naturally occurring amino acids and there are 20 amino acid transferase synthetase enzymes. So each enzyme for one amino acid, but one amino acid gets coded by more than one codon. So that means there would be more than one transfer RNA for one amino acid, and usually all these transfer RNA for one amino acid gets amino acylated by one enzyme only. Okay, so that means this enzyme must identify a transfer RNA which is specified by one amino acid, right? And also this enzyme should differentiate between similar structures of amino acids. So that specificity is very important, because if the wrong amino acid gets amino acylated to transfer RNA by the enzyme, that wrong amino acid will get incorporated into the polypeptide chain. This happens because on the ribosome checks the transfer RNA for its anticodon. It checks for the codon anticodon specificity. It does not check for amino acid. Whatever amino acid transfer RNA brings, ribosome will incorporate it. So it is very important that amino acid transferase synthetase enzymes add correct amino acid. Okay. For this, they have performed the experiment. What they did, they choose cysteine transfer RNA. That means that transfer RNA has been amino acylated by cysteine enzyme, which is the correct one. After charging, they change that amino acid to alanine, and they perform in vitro synthesis of hemoglobin, because this hemoglobin chain has one cysteine molecule in each chain. And then they analyze the sequence of the polypeptide chain of the hemoglobin. So they found out that in place of cysteine, there was alanine. So what it means, that transfer RNA brought alanine because they have changed it post amino acylation. So it brought alanine, and that alanine, which is a wrong amino acid, got efficiently incorporated into the polypeptide chain. So this proves that on ribosome, amino acid doesn't get checked. Okay, so this proofreading of this amino acid transferase synthetase enzyme becomes very important. And how it proofreads, how it correctly adds amino acid to a transfer RNA. So this necessary specificity is achieved by two successive steps. Okay, just now we saw that the reaction takes place in two steps. In the first step, it forms amino acyl AMP, and in the second step, it forms amino acyl transfer RNA. If it would have been only one step, then it ultimately generates amino acyl transfer RNA. If something goes wrong, there is no checkpoint in between, right? So these two steps, this multiplicative acts as a filter for the proofreading. And how it does it? The binding of any incorrect amino acyl AMP. In the first step, amino acyl AMP forms. If the wrong amino acid gets attached to AMP, then this amino acid AMP, which is the wrong one, gets attached to the different binding site of the enzyme. And at this binding site, this amino acid AMP will get hydrolyzed. Hydrolyzed means the bond will break and the amino acid and AMP will get separated. So wrong amino acid will not get attached to transfer RNA in the second step. In the first step only, it will correct itself. Okay. Here we can take an example of isoleucine and valine. Isoleucine and valine have similar structures, only difference is the methylene group, that is CH2 group is present in the isoleucine. Rest entire structure of these two amino acids is same. So the enzyme has to be very specific to differentiate between isoleucine and valine. But isoleucine transferase synthetase enzyme does it very efficiently. It has 200-fold specificity for isoleucine than valine. If valine gets incorporated, that is valine AMP forms, then this valine AMP gets attached to a different binding site, which hydrolyzes valine and AMP, because valine has a shorter side chain because it doesn't have that methylene group. So it has shorter side chain. So it fits in the different binding site, not in the isoleucine binding site. And this binding site hydrolyzes it. Hydrolyzes valine and valine and AMP get separated, and then this isoleucine transferase synthetase enzyme adds correct amino acid, that is isoleucine. Okay, that's how it is differentiates between two similar amino acids and adds only the correct one. Because of this, the overall error rate of protein synthesis is 1 mistake per 10,000 amino acids incorporated. And this is quite a good rate. If you compare this with the polymerase, then it is not, the fidelity is not that great, but as you know that in protein synthesis, in 100 protein molecules, if one is wrong or the sequence is wrong somewhere, then it doesn't matter that much to the cell. Most of the protein molecules get degraded before use. So even this error rate is quite an achievement for the enzyme. Here this diagram shows the transfer RNA, and here you can see the green and the orange positions of the nucleotides in the transfer RNA, which is used for binding or which is used for specificity by the enzyme. From these positions of the amino acid, these nucleotides, enzyme identifies a particular transfer RNA. The blue ones are common for all transfer RNAs. You can see this CCA position. So it is common for all transfer RNAs. So they will not take part in specificity, but the orange and green dots, the nucleotides, and of course the anticodon, which is different in each transfer RNA, gives a uniqueness to transfer RNA and binds specifically to the enzyme. Okay, that's how the enzyme recognizes a particular transfer RNA and adds only the correct amino acid. Okay. Now, this was the first step of protein synthesis, that is amino acylation. So now the transfer RNA has got amino acylated with the correct amino acid. The next step is the initiation. For initiation, we require a ribosome. So first, let's see the structure of ribosome. We are not going to details because we have already done this. The bacterial ribosome, 70S, which is made up of 50 and 30S. 50S has this 23S rRNA, 5S rRNA, and 30S has 16S rRNA. Now here, we have to remember the ribosomal RNAs, because these ribosomal RNAs will take part in initiation as well as elongation process. And in eukaryotes, they have this 28S, 5.8S, and 5S rRNA in large subunit and 18S RNA in the small subunit. But because we are doing the details of bacterial protein synthesis, these will come across more. This is the molecular detail of the ribosome. Ribosome actually looks like this. Here, the tightly coiled structures are proteins, and these single strands which are wound on themselves is the ribosomal RNA. This is the 30S subunit and this is the 50S subunit. This is the detailed structure of bacterial ribosome. And this orange one is the transfer RNA. So you can imagine the three-dimensional structure of ribosome. How transfer RNA binds to the small and the large subunit, the complete ribosome. So this is considered as a binding site for the transfer RNA. This is the high molecular structure of ribosome, and this is 50S and 30S subunit. Now here you can see in the 50S subunit there are three sites: E site, P site and A site. E is exit site, P is peptidyl site and A is amino acid site. And these three are transfer RNAs. See, purple, mauve and gray. These colors show three transfer RNAs in their respective sites, and this orange one is the anticodon of the transfer RNA. Okay. Then these worm-like structures, blue ones, are the proteins of 50S subunit, and this green and white is the ribosomal RNA. In that also, this white is the basis and green is the backbone. That means white is the nitrogen basis of ribosomal RNA and green is the backbone. That means sugar phosphate backbone of the ribosomal RNA. Same with the 30S, that is small subunit. Here this yellow is the proteins and this white is the ribosomal RNA, and this orange is the mRNA that interacts with the transfer RNA anticodon. Only this much mRNA has been seen because the rest of the mRNA must be intertwined in the clefts of the 30S subunit. This is a complete active bacterial ribosome. So here this is the same structure, only the complete ribosome has shown and from a different angle. So here you can see this is that mRNA, three transfer RNAs, large subunit and small subunit. And inset they have shown the same structure but transfer RNA removed, so that you can see the binding site or the cleft where transfer RNA binds and reaction takes place. Okay, so this is the cleft to which transfer RNA binds. So here is the cleft where the ribosome has that E, P and A site, where the initiation, elongation and termination reactions take place. So remember the positions on the ribosome. Now, the first step of bacterial protein synthesis, that is initiation of translation. Now, initiation of translation, the requirement is the mRNA which has been synthesized, so that mRNA after transcription is in the cytoplasm. Then it requires ribosomal subunits which are also present in the cytoplasm, but they are still separate, 50 and 30S. And it requires charged transfer RNA. Now we have already done the first step, so transfer RNA is also ready. Now, if you remember the general structure of mRNA, it has 5' UTR, protein coding region, and 3' UTR. So first, initiation codon, that is AUG, is the first codon of the protein coding region, and this AUG codes for methionine, right? every organism has 2 transfer RNAs for methionine. Why 2? Because one will be exclusively used for initiation and other will be used for the methionine which will come in the sequence in between of the polypeptide chain. Okay, and in prokaryotes it is easy to differentiate between these two methionines because the first, that is initiate, the use for initiation is formilated. It is called as F-met. That methionine gets added by a formyl group. It is called as formilated methionine, which is used for the initiation. And the methionine which will come in the rest of the sequence of the polypeptide, it will be normal methionine, that is usual methionine structure. So the transfer RNA, which is exclusively for initiation, will bring the formilated methionine and binds to the AUG codon during the initiation. So here is the first point. Although methionine has only one codon, all organisms have 2 transfer RNAs. Okay. In bacteria, 2 types of transfer RNA specific for methionine and how they are designated. Remember these designations: transfer RNA MET and transfer RNA F-MET. Okay, these are the 2 transfer RNAs for methionine. So this F-MET is exclusively for initiation and this transfer RNA MET is for methionine which will come in the sequence of the polypeptide. So the amino acid gets incorporated in response to this AUG codon is N-formyl methionine. This is written as F-MET. So the nitrogen of this methionine gets formilated and it arrives in the ribosome in this form: N-formyl methionine tRNA F-MET. It is written as this F-MET tRNA F-MET. And remember this nomenclature suggests that this is a transfer RNA for F-MET and it is bringing F-MET. Okay, when you write it in a superscript, that means this transfer RNA is used for F-MET. This is F-MET transfer RNA. And when you write it in the hyphen form, that means it is bringing F-MET. So now it is the charged transfer RNA. Okay. And this reaction takes place in 2 steps. First, the methionine get attached to the transfer RNA F-MET. Okay, this is that amino acylation step where this tRNA, MET tRNA synthetase enzyme attaches methionine to the transfer RNA F-MET. Okay, though there are 2 transfer RNAs, the enzyme is same. This MET transfer RNA synthetase enzyme only amino acylates both the transfer RNAs. Okay, there is no different enzyme for initiation and the other methionine. Okay, same enzyme does the reaction. So this enzyme adds this methionine to tRNA F-MET. So this is a reaction: methionine plus tRNA F-MET plus ATP gives MET tRNA F-MET, AMP and pyrophosphate. So here, see what is the difference? The transfer RNA is for F-MET, but still it has only methionine. Okay. In the second step, this transformylase enzyme transfers the formyl group from N10-formyl tetrahydrofolate to the amino group of the methionine residue. That means the enzyme adds only the usual methionine. This methionine gets formilated by a different enzyme. So that enzyme is this transformylase. And from this, from where this formyl group comes? From here, formyl tetrahydrofolate. Okay. So what is the reaction? This is the group formyl tetrahydrofolate. This is the transfer RNA, MET tRNA F-MET. Now here you can see that it becomes F-MET because this formyl group from this group has transferred to the methionine and it becomes F-MET transfer RNA F-MET and the group changes to tetrahydrofolate. This tetrahydrofolate is a derivative of folate, folic acid, vitamin B9. Okay. So this group is used for the transfer of formyl group. So now this transfer RNA becomes charged with F-met. So here you can see this is the formyl methionine. This is the normal methionine and this is the formyl group, CHO. Okay. So now this becomes the first transfer RNA which is used for initiation. So now let's see the process of initiation. All these are the requirements what we require for this process. 30S subunit, mRNA, initiating F-met transfer RNA F-met which is now ready. 3 proteins called as initiation factors, IF1, IF2 and IF3. It requires GTP, energy source, 50S ribosomal subunit and Mg2+. Okay. Now, this is the first step of the initiation of translation in bacteria. In the first step, 30S subunit of ribosome gets bound by 2 initiation factors, IF1 and IF3. And pay attention at the positions where IF1 binds and where IF3 binds. Okay. Then mRNA comes and mRNA gets bound to this 30S ribosomal subunit. Now, this mRNA has this SD sequence called as Shine-Delgado sequence. This Shine-Delgado sequence interacts with the 16S ribosomal RNA from small subunit and positions this mRNA. Positioning of mRNA is important because now you can see these 3 are the sites. This is the E site, this is the P site, and this is the A site. Now you can see this AUG is in the correctly positioned at the P site. This positioning is very important, and how it identifies with this reaction, with this interaction between this SD sequence and the 16S rRNA. So here is that interaction. This is the sequence at the 3' end of the 16S rRNA, and this is the SD sequence. This SD sequence is usually the purine rich sequence. So here you can see AGG, and this is the one example, not necessarily always this could be the sequence, but usually it is purine rich sequence. And this is the initiation codon. Okay. So this purine rich SD sequence forms complementary base pairing with the 16S rRNA at the 3' end, which is pyrimidine rich. So purine rich SD sequence forms complementary base pairing with the pyrimidine rich 16S rRNA, and this interaction is very important for positioning mRNA correctly on 30S ribosomal subunit. Okay. Now, here is the AUG sequence, right? That is AUG codon. That means from here the protein coding region starts. That means this SD sequence is present in 5' UTR. Okay. 5' untranslated region has this SD sequence, right? And this 16S rRNA interacts with it. You must have studied or heard somewhere that 16S rRNA sequencing. Yes, the 16S rRNA is used for sequencing. It is used because this is highly conserved sequence. The sequences is used for sequencing are highly conserved. And why they are conserved? Because of this interaction. Because of this interaction, the 16S rRNA sequence is highly conserved. Okay, because they form a complementary base pairing with the SD sequence. And now the mRNA has been positioned. This IF1, you can see it is positioned at the A site. It is because the first transfer RNA, which will bring the F-met, formilated methionine, will bind to the P site. And remember, this first transfer RNA which brings the initiating amino acid, that is methionine, in this case formaldehyde methionine, only binds to P site. Rest all transfer RNAs bringing amino acids will bind to A site. Okay, only the first transfer RNA will bind to P site. So this binding of IF1 to A site prevents binding of this first transfer RNA to the A site because it blocks this site. Okay, that's why the position is important. So the incoming first transfer RNA will bind to the P site, and this IF3 binds here. This IF3 binding prevents the premature association of this small subunit with the large subunit. Large subunit should bind at the correct time. So that's why I told you, remember the positions. This IF3 prevents the premature binding of 50S ribosomal subunit, and IF1 prevents the binding of first transfer RNA to the A site. Okay. This is the first step of initiation. Now the second step. In the second step, we can see here the initiating transfer RNA. This transfer RNA, which has F-met, is attached to the IF2 bound GTP. Okay, so this transfer RNA gets bound by initiation factor 2, and it has already bound to GTP. So this is the second step. F-met transfer RNA F-met bind to IF2 GTP, binds to the P site of the ribosome. Okay, it is correctly positioned. And now the third step. In the third step, the large subunit will bind. Okay, this 50S ribosomal subunit binds to the 30S, this entire complex. So that now you can see the sites now are complete. This is the E site, this is P site, and this is A site. And when large subunit binds, GTP gets hydrolyzed to GDP and phosphate, and all the initiation factors are released. So binding of ribosomal subunit, this GTP gets hydrolyzed. Okay, so this is the third step. Okay, have you followed?
Yes, ma'am.
So in this, you realize that the binding of this mRNA is very important, because if mRNA binds correctly, then it will position itself correctly at the P site, the transfer RNA will bind correctly, and then the 50S subunit will bind also correctly, right? So this initiation codon is only of 3 nucleotides. So to help it, the other interactions are important. So what is the first interaction? First interaction is this SG sequence and 16S RNA. This sequence interaction helps in the binding. Then it helps in again with the codon anticodon. See, AUG, and it has this anticodon CAU. So this codon anticodon specificity also helps in binding this transfer RNA to the correct P site. Okay, so all this helps in the binding of this correctly at the first codon, that is AUG, because it is very difficult to find a 3 nucleotide sequence, right? If it binds correctly, then now the E and A site are now clear, because at the end you can see this E and A site are clear. Now what will happen? The next transfer RNA, which brings the next amino acid according to this codon, will bind to the A site, and process is initiated smoothly. Okay, the process will go on smoothly. So these steps in the initiation are important. Any doubt till here? You have
No,
understood?
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, initiation of translation in eukaryotes. Okay, this was in the prokaryotes. In eukaryotes, it is different because eukaryotes have 5 prime cap at the 5 prime end and 3 prime poly A tail at the 3 prime end of the mRNA. Rest structure is same, that is 5 prime UTR and protein coding sequence and the 3 prime UTR. But eukaryotes do not have any SD sequence or formilated methionine. All this takes place only in prokaryotes. Okay. So initiation in eukaryotes is a bit different. We'll follow this steps, but let's first see the diagram. Okay. This is the initiation of translation in eukaryotes. Now in eukaryotes, there are more initiation factors. So they are represented like this, EIF. E stands for eukaryotes and IF is for initiation factor. So you can see there are many initiation factors are required for initiation in eukaryotes. And both 5 prime cap as well as 3 prime poly A tail helps in initiation. I told you in the function of these two significance that they help in initiation of translation. So here is that their role. Okay. So this is the 40A subunit. Now we are talking about eukaryotes. So small subunit is the 40A subunit. This elongation factor 1A and F3 first binds to this 40A subunit. Then elongation factor 1 binds and this is the first transfer RNA which brings methionine. Okay, and here you can see there it is not formilated because formilated methionine doesn't occur in eukaryotes. It is a normal methionine, but eukaryotes also have 2 transfer RNAs. One transfer RNA which brings this methionine, initiating methionine, is exclusively for initiation, and the other transfer RNA is used for methionine which will come in the rest of the polypeptide chain. Okay. So this is that first transfer RNA. It has bind to this EIF2 with GTP. This is the same. Okay. So same like prokaryotes. That it is this first transfer RNA is bound to initiation factor 2 and GTP. This transfer RNA binds to this complex. Okay. And they form this complex. And now second is the mRNA. Now this mRNA, you can see it is in the loop form. Why? Because these initiation factors interact with 5 prime end as well as the 3 prime end. You can see this, the 3 prime end, it is still bound with the PAB protein. What is this PAB protein? Poly A binding protein. Remember in the this poly A tail, polyadenylation, these PAB proteins remain bound to the poly A tail and stabilize it. So it is that protein which is still bound to the poly A tail. Okay. At the 5 prime end, this initiation factor 4E binds. Then it gets bound by initiation factor 4G, and this 4G interacts with PAB. So you can see here the sandwich. In between there is initiation factor 4G, which one end interacts with the PABP, which has bound to 3 prime end, and the other side it binds with 4E, which binds to the 5 prime cap. Okay. And that's why this mRNA has been looped. It also gets bind by initiation factor 4A and 4B. And now these two will form a complex. Okay. Because there is no SD sequence, it is all these initiation factor helps to find the first codon, that is initiation codon, that is AUG. Okay. This entire complex scans the mRNA for the AUG codon. Okay. That means this complex moves along the mRNA. And now you can see here the scanning, and the scanning requires ATP. It's an energy consuming process. Now you can see this complex has moved and now it has found the AUG codon, which is the initiation codon, and it has correctly positioned itself at the AUG codon. When it positions itself, the initiation factor gets released and 68 subunit binds. The 68 subunit binds the GTP which has been bound to the initiation factor 2 and transfer RNA. This step is same as prokaryotes. When large subunit binds, GTP gets hydrolyzed to GDP, and it forms a complete ribosome. Okay, and this hydrolysis is brought about by this initiation factor 5b. And when large subunit binds, all the initiation factor gets released from the complex. Okay, and now here you can see that this first transfer RNA has been correctly positioned to its respective codon, AUG. So this anticodon is CAU. Okay, now it has been bound to the P site, the E site and A site are free, and the incoming transfer RNA will bind to now A site, and the elongation can take place. So all these initiation factors are required to find the correct initiation point, that is the first codon AUG. Okay. So all this text is for this only. So here in this table, they have given a factor and a function. So in bacteria, you can see only 3 initiation factors are required, but in eukaryotes, there are, in literature, they say it could be 9 to 11 initiation factors required for initiation. Okay, because some binds to mRNA. In mRNA also there are 2 ends. Some binds to 5 prime cap, other binds to 3 prime poly-A tail, and then they loop out, and then some factors bind to the common proteins, common initiation factors. Then some bind to transfer RNA, some bind to 30S subunit, because all these are separate units. So to bring them together, all these initiation factors work and they form a complex, and then entire complex scans the mRNA for AUG codon. Getting it? And when they find it, large subunit binds and all the initiation factor gets released, and also it undergoes hydrolysis of GTP. Okay, when the large subunit gets correctly positioned, initiation is completed. Okay, so here we have completed the initiation in prokaryotes as well as eukaryotes. Right, so we'll stop here for the day and we'll start with the next step, that is elongation, next time, that is tomorrow. Have you followed till here? Any questions?
No, ma'am. समझा सब.
Okay. If you still have doubt with that codon, anticodon, please go through. Okay, and you can ask anytime.
Finish by like 1:15.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Hello students, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Okay, today we will start our paper 1 unit 1 session, which is actually a concept of your research. Okay, now in this unit you will be learning what is research, why to do research, and when to do research. Okay, so by learning the parameters of the things, or we can say by learning the feature of particular characteristic, we will define why, when, and what is research. So as we start, we will say, or we will first see what actually the research is described or what is embraces. First, it is a creative work but done in a very systematic manner. Because if the work is not organized, not well designed, then it can't be a research work, because for every research there is a lot of planning. So in short, creative work is undertaken when it is on a systematic base. Okay. Next, it is appropriate to increase the stock knowledge. Now, what does this stock knowledge is actually? Stock knowledge can be defined as it is a knowledge of any human being, person, any organism, or science, biology, life science, environment, technology, application of each and everything, the knowledge which we have already. So we are using that knowledge to increase it, or we can say to modify it, or to find a particular loopholes, or we can say we are just redefining the purpose of the work. So in short, it is like an appropriate increase of your stock knowledge. Clear? Now, it can also be for a new application, or it is used to establish or confirm any facts, like if a particular character is known for xyz, so is it actually like that, or does it modified, or it maybe have some exception character. So that is a thing you can establish, or you can confirm that criteria by doing your research work and all that. Okay. So it is also used to reaffirm the result of previous work. Means if someone have stated a statement, or we can say someone have hypothesized a theory, so is the theory actually works, so that theory can be taken out and another experimental work can be done to prove that theory. Next, it is used to solve a new or existing problem. So in short, we can say if there are some of the issues which was not answered with earlier experimentation or with earlier hypothesis, that problems can be taken, or there can be a different branch of that issue or problem which can be cured. So you can actually have a different way. It can be a subpart, it can be a substitute, or it can be any of the descriptive manner. So you have very, we can say, versatile way of finding your research work and everything. Next, it is also to use, or we can say to support the existing theorem. Now, what is this theorem? Do you remember you have learned the theorems of your maths and physics? So when you go for the theorems work, if different thing I will say, physics has many of the quotations, or we will say biology has an environmental statement. So each and everything has its possibility. So that theorem can be proved on the basis of some experiment. So designing an experiment to prove the theorem is actually a data, we can say data collection or data modification or management for proving that type of theorems. Next, we can also describe as theory, or we can say the theorems or theories can be developed or modified in a new way. So if we say it was like if a person is saying a statement, or if theorem is already present, if it is giving you a new invention, then we can suggest it has a new theorems, or we can also say a new theory has been developed by the experimentation of the existing theorem. So these are the branches of your research. It is also be called as an expansion of your past work, or we can say any of the work which was not completed due to some circumstances in backdated time. It can be taken and be completed, or we can say it can be enhanced or by its knowledge and making it a approved full-fledged full idea detail, and making it an applications and confirm the hypothesis. So in short, it is said that it is an expansion of your past work of the field, or we can say the later work of the field and extra. It is also used to validate the instrumentation or procedure. So what does this statement say? if any instrument is given to you. Am I right? So the general protocol is that this instrumentation work like in a particular temperature. We can say it work better at a 40 degree. So we can design an experiment to prove the instrumentation manual or to validate the parameters, or we can actually say it is a validation of methodology for the instrumentation. So there are different terms and criteria which can be used to specify the research discussion or dispersion, or we can say it embraces a lot of things when the research is considered. So it is also used to students, just a second. Okay, we will back to our research work. So experiments are also used to replicate the elements, or we can say the prior data or prior projects, or the whole project. So it can be like an example to setting a confirmation or affirmation, or finding a well-proof data for the given result. So it is a supportive type of research. Now we can also say the basic research primarily consists of documentations, discovery and interpretation. Now what documentation? First, documentation deals with all the literatures. So you have already done your search engines. Am I right? Students, did you try your homework with your search engine? Students, am I audible to you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so anyone try to find your search engine? The homework given to you, assignment 11.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so that is actually the documentations and all that you will be doing, and we will actually explore more aspect of the documentations and many things. Plus there are new discoveries, because when you read you gain knowledge, so you have a curiosity why it is like that only. So it actually discovers a new thing, and by the discovering the thing you find, you like tend to find it mechanism. So when you know the mechanism, when you know the principle of working, you actually interpret, you actually give the inference to that particular experimentation or hypothesis. So in short, we say primary research, sorry, primary research is actually a short form of a documentation, discovery and interpretation. Okay. Next, we can also say R&D actually refers to the advancement of the system per on, it is on purpose. So when R&D work is considered, the purpose is actually generalized. You find the main aspect of the purpose, and then you modify your purpose or like systems, or we can say the different method for making that purpose to be more reliable, more dependable, and more cost efficient and all that, because efficiency is much important when you are finding a R&D work and all that. Okay, as we go further, we will just see the well-known quotes for research, like what is actually research known. They many of the like well-known researchers have stated the quote. So some of the quotes are like, one have said research is a process of steps used to collect, analyze information and to increase the understanding of a topic or issue. So it is just a definition for a research. Or it is also described as research comprises defining, redefining problems, formulating hypotheses, suggesting solution, collecting, organizing, evaluating data, making deduction or reaching conclusion, and mostly testing the conclusion to determine whether they fit the formulating hypothesis. So in this quote, actually the researcher have fully elaborated the quality of research in a more precise and specific terms. So all the characters has been included in this definition. Okay, this it is actually can also be called as a careful investigation or inquiry special to a search of a new fact or any branch of knowledge, systematic effort to gain a new knowledge, or research as a movement from known to unknown. So these are the well-known quotes which actually defines what is research. Clear? Now, as we go further, what are the points you should consider when you are looking for a research? First is you should be happy, because if you are not happy, then you just don't do the research, because the productivity affect a lot by your energy level and all that. So mainly it is when you are happy, it makes you a positive feeling and it releases positive energy, and you are actually curious to do the work. So that is a reason you should always be happy. Second, it like makes your negativity lesser and it boosts the productivity. So first point is you should be happy when you are doing the research. If you are not okay, just skip the research, don't do anything. Next, it is a process of product. Now what it the term says, process of product, like it is something very different term. So actually it is a artifact of learning when intellectual evolution is gained. Means it can be a mechanism or the manufacturing of a new idea based on your earlier or your stock knowledge. So a good researcher is actually rigorous and demanding in work. Next, how to make records, because when the research is term, you should have a record of each and everything. Okay, so what does this record can be? First, you should be writing whenever you're making an experiment. So every time when you do an experiment, every do's and don'ts should be written. Like if you are using a buffer of 5 and you are taking the buffer of 5.2, then you should actually write the experiment deals with pH 5, but I am using pH 5.2. So you should write that term, because in a future or during that data analysis, there may be some like something manual error, or we can say there can be something a sampling error. So that justification can be provided by your this input, because you have used pH 5.2 in place of 5. So that's why the activity may be decreases or increases. So these types of actual error or these types of sampling errors may arises when you are analyzing your data. So that is a reason you should always write what are you modifying or what are you changing while doing the experimentation. Even if you are using Whatman paper in place of filter paper, or the either way, like when the Whatman paper is asked and you are using filter paper for filtration, so that may leads to you the precipitation, or we can say a fine particle may be present in your filtrate, or we can say the suspension. So that particular particle may increase your OD because the turbidity is seen. So that is a reason the each and every factor have to be written it out. Am I clear, students? समझ में आ रहा है? Students?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now this is the first thing. Writing in exercise provide during the experiment. So this term means this. Next, writing is thinking. Now what this statement actually says you, whenever you think an idea or whenever think an experimentation, like if you want like a particular assay of enzyme, okay, so assay of enzyme need a particular temperature for optimum activity. So it is stated in literature that the enzyme X work best at 40 degree. Now some of the time you don't get an incubator for 40 degrees Celsius. So for making the use of a water bath for a 40 degrees Celsius is a modification. You are just like solving the purpose, but the effect of incubation and the effect of wet water incubation is very different. So you should always write the 40 degrees Celsius was kept in water bath. So that all thing. you are changing, you are thinking for the experimentation. So you should write, you should make a note of each and everything. Okay. Next is, writing is a chance to express thought in organized or constructive manner. Now what this statement say? Whenever you design an experiment, you start an protocol, your procedure manual. Okay, you know the procedure. You have to do ABC for having a particular type of your product, or we can say particular result. So you are actually designing your experiment, you are making your idea or your thought in a main manner, like organized way, managed way. Or because whenever the steps are given, you can't do step 5 before step 3. So it is a particular like we can say a level, a hierarchy marking. So if you are not completed your 1 to 3 step, you can't go to step 5. So that is a thing that it makes a organized and or constructive manner of your research. So whenever you are making a record, this 3 thing is very important. Each thing have to be written, each modification have to be written, and each idea you design for an experimentation should be added in a right way, not that the your like a chronological order of your idea should be in a very specific term. Clear? So these are the general points you will consider when you are designing an research or designing an experiment or like different protocols. As we go further, now we will deal with 10-10-10 principle for literature study. Now what is this 10-10-10 principle study? I have taught you the search engine, right? Now how you will use that search engine? Now what is this 10-10-10 principle? I will justify by using the example of your search engine. Okay, first you should always decide topic, search and shortlist 10 related journals or book. Means when I have given you the role of biotin or I have given the role of calcium, so you decide your topic, you go to the search protocol, you type, you shortlist 10 related journal on the basis you need. Like if you need the recent work, then you will go for your like a backdated 5 years data. Then you can have a latest work, or if you need any standard protocol, then go for that search, find that 10 related article. Okay, now finding that top 10 related article doesn't stop you. Now you have to read that 10 article with your interest, and we can say you have to actually have to spend to summarize that paper into your own word. Like if you have studied or downloaded a paper which define the role of calcium or role of biotin in an human being, so when you study you have some summary, like something note, it works in the like this way, the calcium level is working signaling and all that, that are the notes. So you should summarize that thing in your own words by making that 10 pages paper or 5 pages paper into your own 5 to 10 line. You actually give the product to yourself that you have actually read the quality work and you have actually understand that paper. Because if you are not able to summarize the paper, that paper is not useful to you. So just go for another option, go back again, search another paper on that topic and go and read that paper again. So this is a 10-10 principle and you should follow whenever you are researching, because you can't read 100 of papers at a time. So you should actually make your own limit. If 10 papers are not possible, then just read your 5 paper. But when you read, you should note, you should write the summary of that paper, because if you are not writing, if you are not summarizing that thing, you are not actually understanding the paper, you are not able to deal with the content of the researchers. Because many a time the way of saying the thing is very different, because sometimes if I want to say the particular compound X, is increasing my activity of enzyme. So the researcher would also say compound X is actually facilitating the work of enzyme B. So there are many different terms, or I can also say the enzyme A is actually catalyzing the activity of enzyme. So these are the different ways of the writing of the researcher. So you have to actually read and find your summary. What are you understanding by that paper? Clear, student? Are you understanding? Student, can we go further? Students, am I audible to you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So now you know what is this 10-10-10 principle. So now we go as further. What is the characteristics of this is research? So means what are the features? So we will just see. First, it is used to solve a problem. Next, it actually gather, or it is actually a collection of a primary data or organization or management of the existing data for a new purpose. Because if I am making a survey, then I will collect the primary data on the field, and by making that field data, the survey data, making a management, or I will make that data with a comparative study, then I'm actually using that primary data. So it is can be a feature of a research where these types of possibilities are like interchangeable. So primary can be secondary data source, and secondary data can also be a secondary source. So it is just a high level, or we can say each data actually count. Even a single data plays a major role. Okay. So it is based on the observational experience. Now what is this observable? Because when you have done your chi-square test, or when you have done the goodness of it, you are actually looking at the height, at the color, or at the number of the generation, or we can say the number of the parameter you are looking for is actually the observation. So the research is also based on your research experience. Like when you go to a particular field, you actually find many polyalthia trees are there, but none of the or in other way I can say many indigenous species of the tree are available, but not the exotic one. So I can say the which indigenous trees are available, they are actually the encroaching one. They are not allowing the exotic tree to grow there. So these are the particular terms when you know how to observe the parameter. So these are the different terms. Okay. Now I can also say the research is actually a term which demand accurate observation and description. Like when I am looking for a height of a particular thing, then I have to specify the height is in a centimeter or inches. Or when I am saying the color, so color also have a different ranges. So it is a light yellow, it is a dark yellow, or it can be orangish. So there are very variation in the like colorations and all that. That's why research is actually something which need accurate or exact value or exact observation and description. Okay. So it actually employs a careful designed procedure or rigorous analysis. Now, when I say rigorous analysis, it means research is not a thing that you do a experiment just one time and write the result. When you are researching, you have to actually have toward reproducibility. Now, what is this reproducibility? Reproducibility is a term used for finding a protocol or finding a particular mechanism of work to be replicated by another person or to be replicated by another time whenever the experiment is been repeated. Means if the value is around 10 ppm, then whenever the experimentation is done, then it should be near to 10 ppm. If it is going to 11 ppm or 15 ppm or 12 ppm, even the slight change is not acceptable. It has to be nearby 10 ppm. So that is a rigorous analysis where you have to avoid all the exceptions, all the factors which will affect your experimentation research. So research is actually a careful employment of your designed procedure for and rigorous analysis. This statement deals with this idea. Am I clear, student? Can we go further? Students, are you listening? So to nahi gaye na?
No, ma'am.
Okay. So as we go further, there are other features also, like when you develop a generalization or when you develop a principle, a theory. Like I am stating this plant actually flower at like in rainy season, or if I say this tree is fruiting during the March month. So I am actually generalizing a statement for that plant or that tree. Okay. Now for proving or for finding my theory to be true, actually I have to first understand its mechanism. I have to see what is the status of the leaf, what is the photosynthesis or chlorophyll content of that, or actually I have to see the healthiness of that plant, or I will say if the flowering period of the plant is around February, January, then that flowering may get like fertile and they will be giving fruit in March. So that is actually I am predicting on the basis of the flowering. So I am actually understanding that tree. I am not controlling the parameters, but actually I am making an observation. So in short, the understanding, prediction, and making a control. Now what is this control? Control is actually making a ideal condition for that tree. If I am looking for a specific period of fruiting or flowering period of that tree, then I should actually organize the water content level, the sun intensity level, plus the like your food content in the soil should be good all the time whenever I am studying it. So each parameter is actually controlled by me. I am providing each and everything to that plant. That's why I am learning that plant protocol mechanism or that flowering or that fruiting period of that tree. Clear? So in short, developing a generalization, a principle, or theory actually help in understanding the tree, or we can say any specific character predictions by making the control of the optimum characters. Okay. Next, it requires expertise. Now, this statement is slightly, we can't say that it actually requires expertise, but it may require some of the experience, because if you don't know that after flowering the fruit will come, then the protocol or the experimentation can't be done. So that's why require expertise means some kind of knowledge, some kind of experience you need when you are designing and research. Okay. Now, it is also an attempt to find an objective or unbiased solution for the problem. Now, what these statements actually define? Whenever you do your z-test sum, do you remember, students?
Yes, ma'am.
So when you do z-test term, you actually go for the question, go for the claim. You're not saying that the theory is actually true. You're giving the both the possibility, right? True and false. Am I right? So you are giving unbiased solution. You're not making a result before having your like process or your mechanism. So we can say research is actually an objective or unbiased solution for a particular problem. Clear? Because your hypothesis is also a type of research. Next, deliberately or hurriedly activity which is directional but often refines the problem. It's actually, this terms is based when you get very, we can say, when you decide a topic. Okay, when you decide a topic, you are actually directional. You go for a particular details of that topic, you find the problem and you make a list. What are the protocols you are going to follow? You are going to avoid the XYZ, so that all things you are learning. Okay, now last is, or I can say, careful, we can say specific record or careful recording or accurate recording of the reported things or the parameters are actually interested by the person, because if your data are not recorded, data or report are not made carefully, the other person would not be using your data, or it is not using your data as a source for his hypothesis, because your result can be a future hypothesis of another person. He will try to find your particular future aspect as his term. Like if you have defined optimum activity of enzyme A, so the other person can go for optimum activity of that enzyme in different buffer, or we can say in different plant. So it is a future outcome of your result. So this is all interlinked. Clear, students? Can we go further?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now what is the purpose of research? Why to do the research? First, when research is considered, the discoveriness, or we can say the application of the existing scientific procedure, or we can say the application of the existing protocol is used. So we actually use the existing knowledge, the stock knowledge, to find a new theory or new purpose, or we can say a new application of your stock knowledge. Okay, next, it is used to find the hidden truth which has not been discovered yet. Now this statement is actually very generalized, because whenever you go for a study, it doesn't mean that there is something be neglected, but there can be a possibility of change in the particular criteria. Like when I am studying the optimum activity of enzyme, then there can be a chance the enzyme extracted from a particular organism can be a different way, because the extraction of enzyme is also a big issue when you are taking the enzyme. So the, like for example, if I go for the aspergillus, like most, most of the enzymes are derived from the aspergillus also. So aspergillus has many stage. It is a fungi, it has a sporulation stage, it has a mycelia stage, it has a initiation stage. Am I right? You have learned all this. So if I am going for a particular enzyme which is actually is at peak when that aspergillus is at its mycelia stage, or when that enzyme is peak at its sporulation stage. So I should know what is the parameter affecting. So this can be another aspect, because I have just studied the optimum activity of enzyme by extracting it, but I don't know the enzyme was extracted what at sporulation or mycelia. So that is the particular new research I can do on the basis of this. So to find out the truth which is hidden and which has been discovered yet. So this can be an example for this statement. Okay, are you understanding, student, what I am trying to say you? Students, can I go further?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, now it is actually a research study when its own purpose, or we can say when we think and research objective in very different group. Now, what are these different group? Because research can be of any type, we can think of any idea. So what are the actually parameter, or we can say what are the different way, or what are the different groups which we can actually generalize, or which we can actually use as a sub portal or a sub branches, or a substitute for a different icons, or different experiment, or different hypothesis, which can be of different characters also. So it can be actually used to gain the familiarity of phenomena. Now, what is this? It is actually, if I am displaying that the plant A actually gives me only pink color flower, then what is the actually criteria it is giving me pink color? Because that same plant in different region give me purple color. So what is the actually condition? Because that is the same plant, but here it is pink and there it is purple. So it is actually of gaining a like having a phenomenon, because it is changing its color according to the geographic location. So first, pH can be a factor, second, the temperature can be a factor. So these are particular answers you get when you analyze. Okay, next, it is achieved to use new insight, because see, I was dealing with the color of the flower. So and now I am just checking why it is giving me a color. So I have generalized, it may be due to the pH, it may be due to the temperature, but what is actually the pH level, it's making the differentiation of this color, the range of that pH, or the range of the temperature, which actually made that plant to flower with a pink color and to flower with a purple color. So it is actually giving me a detail of the plant mechanism. So research is also used to have a new insight, a new achievements when you are dealing with like a detailed data or a detailed mechanism. Okay, it is used to portray accurately the characteristic of idea, situation, or group. Now, what is this? Like, whenever I am trying to find the color of that pink and purple flower, so I am looking a idea that if I get a result that temperature 40 gives me a pink color, and temperature which is less than 20 area like your hilly region, it show me purple color. So actually I am portraying the specific character of that plant, that whenever you shift this plant or you make this plant to grow in a low level of temperature or hilly area of temperature, you get a purple flower. Like I am giving a solution, I am giving a main feature to that plant, like how to modify same plant basic on its nutritional value, or making its parameters affecting to modify its mechanism and all that. So actually I am accurately portraying the characteristic of that plant. Clear? So next, it is used to determine the frequency, or we can say first finding the occurrence or association with I can say something else, or I can say the flower which was pink and purple. We talked about the pH, the climate change, the like how the optimum temperature can be, like different temperature can be dealing with. So actually I am saying that the intensity of light play a major role. When the intensity of light is more, the colors goes to pink color. But when because in hilly region the sunlight is very less, right? So the intensity of sunlight may be less or low depending on the position of that plant. So I am actually making an association of flower now with the sunlight. Till now I was dealing with the pH and the temperature level, but now I am making an association with sunlight. This is another factor, right? So these are the different parameters you actually go for a research. These are just an example. Am I clear? Now, it is also used to hypothesize or to make a hypothesis of relationship between the variables. Now, what is this variable? This variable is actually the factors I am taking. Like whenever I am taking the pH and the temperature as a factor, that both character can be taken at a time, and the parameter or the hypothesis which you already have studied, like your t-test, your ANOVA, or your chi-square, your unpaired t-test, paired t-test, anything can be used if the data justify the test. Okay, so in short, research is also used to test a hypothesis when a relationship of variable is considered. Am I clear, students? Can we go further? Students, are you listening?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Sona nahi. Next is your, what are the types of studies? So, okay. First is the exploratory or the formulative research study. So this study actually deals with the familiarity or achieveness of the particular data. Next is descriptive research. Descriptive research needs to be accurate by portraying the character. Like if I am saying the height of a plant, then the height of plant should be noted, should be given with the specific details. It is in centimeter, it is in inches. Or if I am going for a weight study, then I should know the fresh weight of the plant. It is of like 10 grams, so 10 gram, 5 grams, so 5 gram. So descriptive research is actually an accurate portrait. Next, diagnostic research. Now, what is diagnostic research? Defining or determining a particular aspect of association or finding a value for a particular character or a particular feature of a like targeted sample or targeted organism or targeted plant, anything. The particular of value or range is actually done in diagnostic research. Next is your hypothesis testing, which you have already learned. It is between the relationship, association, difference between the variables and all, like your height and weight, your length and breadth, your fresh weight and the height of the leaf. So it can be anything. So hypothesis testing are done when the data parameters you have to just find the association, or you have to find the difference between the two different parameters. Am I clear? Now, as we go further, there are a quality called basic research. Now, basic research actually deals with what are the preliminary character you should be keeping in mind when you start a research. Okay, what are now these preliminary or basic things when you do research? First, basic research is pure research, fundamental research or discovery research. So there may be many a time where you can't find any literature, or there may be a time where you won't find any details of your selected topic in any book or data. So that are the time when you should decide you will stay on that topic or not. Because if you are not ready to do a very challenging work, so you can't do. Like for a particular type, if I say some of the enzyme there is a well-known character, that enzyme that degenerated at a high temperature. Am I right? So if any one of the person have just kept on that principle, like after 70 degree, none of the enzyme survivors, none of the enzyme are present, they get degraded, then we won't know the thermal enzyme. What is this thermal enzyme? These are the enzymes which are present in a bacteria or in the organism, which are actually present in your like volcanic tubes and all that. Like all your high temperature areas actually have these types of organism. So they are actually surviving there. Means there are the enzymes which will be stable at a high temperature. Am I right, students? Students, are you listening?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so these are the criteria, because when the research was started of that thermal enzyme, there was no reference for him. So but he stayed on that principle, he stayed on that research, and he has defined we have now well-known enzyme which work in a higher temperature range and all that. So whenever you are doing a research, you have to be very fundamentally very strong, or we can say the discovery is very challenging. Whenever you're finding a new thing, there will be a 90% of chance you will get failed. 90 what, 99% you will get failed. But you have to stick to your topic, and you have to actually find a way how will you justify, or how will you make an experiment to make it confirm that your principle actually work. Because whenever we find an hypothesis, we make hypothesis based on back literature. There are some of the criteria, there are some of the specific loopholes, or we can say there are some alternate substitute way which have led your curiosity to find that hypothesis. So if you can justify your curiosity by making the hypothesis, then there is a way you can actually make a confirmation, make a mark, or make a discovery by analyzing, experimenting, and reporting the value with your hypothesis. Clear? Next, it is executed without, like we can say, a thought of practical end goal. Like how I said, the person was not knowing that he will be true or right, but he still have done the work. He has still have challenged the everything and find that high, we can say, that type of enzyme, or that type of examples are many more which can be used. So actually we should do the research by just avoiding your practical end goal, or actually without thinking that it is true or wrong. You should start. At last, if you can't get the result, you will just say that hypothesis is not like we can say the hypothesis is my enzyme is working at 90 degree. So I will just say the enzyme is just operational to 70 degree, it is not operational to 90 degree. So even if the report is negative, even if the values are negative, you report it because you have done the thing. So it is not that you always find the correct way, but you should report your failure also, because whenever you go for a negative data, it also helps to support the positive data which is already present. Am I right? Now as we go further, we actually focuses on the truth which we search. Like when you go for a literature search, when you summarizes the thing, you find a statement, you find a condition, or you find a particular way of experimentation. So it is actually given to you. So it is something which focuses on the given data which was true. Now it is actually used for the development of educational theories also, like your laws of physics, your thermodynamic laws. So it was all the qualities which was challenged and which was proved, and the theories was made. So it is used for the development of your educational theories. Next, researchers usually perform research as a part of their graduate or doctoral work. Now this basic research actually specify this term, because whenever you start with a basic research, it is just a zero level or just a initial level of any project. So it can, in short, I can say it can be a pilot reading. Whenever you make a titrimetric analysis, you first do a pilot reading. Am I right? After that, you do your triplicates. So that pilot reading, or that first data, is an example of your basic research. So we can say when you do a research, there are a basic research, there are like we can say reported research, and there are R&D work. What are the different type of research? We will do it further. Just now understand basic research start from the initial level of your academics. Next, it arises out of curiosity, because if you don't have any question how that particular thing works, how that particular is present at that time, at that moment, so you can't actually do the research, because curiosity is a main thing which is very important. Because if you are not curious, if you are not observing the things, if you are not just understanding the way or the mechanism of the particular experiment, then you can't actually do the research. Because research is not a work you will follow, or it is not a service you will do. It is a something and a product of your idea, of your we can say of passion, of your like observation and all that. So it needs curiosity. So research is a very different like portal, or we can say very different way where you do the things. It lays to the foundation or advancement of knowledge, or we can also say it leads to the application of the gains. Like in short, I can say when I justify theorem A or theorem B, actually I give a researcher or give a experimenter to make a qualitative against theory, or modifying my AB theory. So I am giving a chance to a future researcher to confirm me or oppose me by giving me your data. Okay, so it is actually making the advancement of your knowledge, or I can say it is a well increase or well addition to your stock knowledge. Clear? Student, can I go further? Are you listening?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, what is applied research? Now you know what is basic research. Now what is this applied research? Because there are the times where research will increase, and it can be called as a systematic inquiry or practical application of science. Because you know your basic research, you know the A works at particular condition. So what is actually the condition which is making the particular selected target to work? You are making a systematic inquiry, or you are making a practical application of that uh, parameter on the subject. So you are actually now advancing your research. Okay, you're solving the practical problem, because till now you have just studied, you have just started your work. So now you are actually experimenting, you're doing different do's and don'ts of the experiment and solving the problem. Okay, you are employing your empirical methodology. Now what is this empirical? Now if I say experimental methodology, then it means you have a procedure, you follow the procedure, and you do the work. But I say when it is an empirical methodology, it means you actually study, you know do's and don'ts, and then you perform your methodology. So that's why I have written both the term. You should employ your empirical experimental methodology in general way. Clear? Now applied research is done under your chaotic or disorganized real world. Now what is this? Whenever you go for an experiment, like you go for a literature sub, okay, the person have done such parameters. So you are dealing with a particular temperature, your concentration and all that. But many a time you have to do the work in this real world, because the ideal condition is very different for your normal. Whenever you make a buffer, it's not that you will always make a buffer of 6.5 if 6.5 is asked. Because whenever you use your like if you go for a acetate buffer, your sodium citrate or your trisodium citrate or citrate buffer, the molarity or we can say the age of the chemical also differ. So if the chemicals are older, then the molarity changes because the hygroscopiness of the chemical increases, the water molecule are present very largely in your compound, so it will affect your pH. The concentration given for your making acetate buffer of 4 or acetate buffer of 3.5 won't be same as in given in your book, because the manual and your main practical making of that buffer will be very different. So applied research is actually done in this world, so you have to actually modify or you have to make slight changes when you do a experimentation. Am I clear, student? Now, research protocols may need to be relaxed slightly and modified. Now, what this mean? Because if I say I have done the experiment in water bath, but the procedure manual has actually asked me to do a incubator, but incubator was not a possible thing. So I have done in a water bath. So that was a slight modification I have done. So it is actually done when I am following the protocol, but it is a modification of my experimentation, which I will write for the data analysis. Okay. Now, the goal is to determine the applicability of educational theory principle by testing with specific hypothesis. Now, in this statement, 3 things are considered. What? First, you have to actually read the principle and the mechanism given your conventional or traditional mechanism. Next, when you are testing the principle, all the parameters have to be with the ideal condition and your practical condition, both have to be considered. And later the hypothesis will be based on the experimentation, because if the data is of just 3 parameters, so you can't use your t-test. Or if I say I have data of just 2 parameters, so I can't use ANOVA. So your hypothesis is actually specific of your data. So this is a different types of goal when you do a applied research. Clear? Now, what is the objective of doing these types of research? Students, first you have to analyze. Means you have to make assumption, you have to find evidence, you have to find the reasons, you have to find the conclusion of the last result, and you have to find the logical implication of your data. So when you go literature search, you should find these 5 different quality when you are analyzing. Okay. Next is compare. Compare is like you have to find a pattern, or you have to observe, like how we discussed the flowering pattern of that plant. It was purple and it was pink. So we are finding that pattern. We are deriving the idea of finding a way how it is different. So we have the objective is to compare also. Next is contrast. Now contrast is like if my product is more efficient than you, or if I say A product is more efficient than B, then what is this differentiation can also be done with the research objective. This synthesize means finding a discovery, like a combination, or I can say redefining the given protocol or rational idea. So we are actually synthesizing, we are actually discovering the thing. Okay, so we integrate. Now what is this integrate? When I decide to learn the flowering pattern of that plant, I'm actually collecting the data of pH, I'm actually collecting the data of the temperature, I'm actually finding the data of the intensity of sunlight. So I'm actually making all the data to come together and make a pattern, a meta integration of a affecting factor of that flowering of the tree or plant. Okay. Next is to evaluate. Now what is evaluate? Actually it is a finding a particular point where that work will lie. Like if I say I'm finding the optimum temperature of enzyme, means I am saying the optimum temperature is 40 degree. So I am specifying that enzyme A will be at its best at 40 degrees Celsius. Clear, students? Now, last thing for a day, what is a base model or what is a criteria when you consider a research? First, it has an introduction, because in introduction you will state the formula. You will state a formula, you will state a problem, you will state a statement, you will state a goal, or you will state a purpose. So introduction is very important. In short, I can say the aim of the experimentation, the aim of the research, like why I am doing this research. Okay. Second is your literature review, like by using your all literature, your search engine, your book details, your conventional traditional details, your protocols, your manuals, everything go under this, your literature review. That is the second stage. Third is your methodology. Now methodology can be of different time. We will do while we are doing with methodology, because in different way I can say it can be descriptive, it can be qualitative, it can be quantitative, it can be like a determining thing. So there are many other factors. Next is the result. You get a output of your experimentation. Okay. And last is your summary, conclusion, and further research. So this is your base model. We will discuss all this factor in our next lecture. Okay. Students, are you listening?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Aishwarya madam.